What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today, we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and continue our coverage over Spider-Man. And you know the reason why, because we have Spider-Man No Way Home finally here. And so it made sense for us to cover the return of the Sinister Six Storyline because we literally have most of the members of the Sinister Six going to appear in the No Way Home movie. So if you do like today's comic book video, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoy today's video. So with the opening of this book, we actually pick up with the classic Marvel villain known as Electro. Of course, the name gives it away. He has electricity powers. We see him going after some kind of device that will power him up even more. So while he is breaking into this building, of course you have Spider-Man appear, and we get a big battle between the two characters in the opening of the book. This is kind of fun because there is no slow build-up with each villain. We're really, right off the bat, it is Electro and Spider-Man fighting against each other. You may think that maybe Electro is going to get captured and be put on the back burner for something down the road for the book. You actually have Dr. Octopus appear, where we learn that he was the one who left all of the clues out there to make Electro come here to this building. The reason why is because he wants to recruit Electro into his group. So we see Electro agreeing to work together with Dr. Octopus. You then have Dr. Octopus use his forearms to keep Spider-Man busy while this deal is complete, then making part of the roof fall apart, which could fall on top of some random person, so Spider-Man has to stop chasing after Dr. Octopus and Electro and to save that person. This leads us to Spider-Man being Peter Parker, working his research job at Empire State University. This is where we learn this concept called ley lines, which are magnetic forces that are hidden across the world. If they are able to connect to them, it will be a better power source for the world. They are planning to shoot a satellite up in space to spray out some chemical to help them complete this task. In the middle of all this talking and planning, you have Iron Man appear, which of course everyone is freaking out because it is Iron Man, who is famous and bringing a piece they need to help them complete their job. And you have Spider-Man try to show off as well, like everyone loves him as much as Iron Man, except they don't. So it is pretty fun to see Spider-Man kind of get dissed by Iron Man. We then switch over to Mary Jane, where at this point she was working as an actress for some drama show. We see her acting out a scene, but she does mess up her lines. With her doing that, well, of course, you had the director get upset and actually leaves angry. When Mary Jane is upset that she got yelled at, well, that is when her co-actor tells her the director's wife has become an alcoholic. That is why he is upset. But literally moments later, we see a light prop fall down on his head, making it seem that he is dead now, except he is alive. But someone says that the rope was cut, making it sound that someone really went out of their way to kill the director. Later on, we see Mary Jane and Peter Parker going to Aunt May's house, who is engaged to Nathan Lubinsky, an old man who is wheelchair bound. He does live there with Aunt May, but Aunt May mentions that he has been acting weird lately. So when he leaves, saying that he has to run some errands, it makes Aunt May asking Peter Parker to follow him to see what he is up to. So the next couple pages remind us that recently at this time in Marvel Comics, Nathan had a gambling problem, which was supposed to be solved at this point. But this is where we get reminded that he is also close to dying. We get reminded by Nathan leaving the bank, but he apparently leaves with a lot of money, with him leaving with so much money that makes some thugs try to rob Nathan. Then it makes Peter Parker change into Spider-Man to stop these guys. But after he saves Nathan from the thugs, you have a lady tell us that the reason why Nathan is so sad and grumpy towards other people is because he knows his life is getting shorter. That makes Peter Parker realize that his death could affect Aunt May too. The end of the first chapter, we see Dr. Octopus go find Sandman, who at this point in Marvel Comics, he stopped being a villain and now he is a good guy trying to live a quiet life. Except you have Dr. Octopus threaten to kill the family Sandman is living with to make Sandman work with Dr. Octopus. Then Dr. Octopus mentions to us that he is planning to go around and recreate the Sinister Six. We then pick up with one of the many hobgoblins at this time, Jason Macendale, except this is when he was possessed by a demon. A little bit after this, we see Hobgoblin lose this demon, and the demon goes on to become Demogoblin. Except just like earlier, you have Doc Ock appear, and we see him trying to recruit Hobgoblin. The way he is able to convince Hobgoblin to join is by almost killing him, which makes Hobgoblin think that maybe Doc Ock is someone he should be working with. Picking back up with Spider-Man, we see him stopping someone from getting pictures of the launch of the satellite, just basically stating that with this project on ley lines, people are trying to get pictures for different reasons, sabotage, or even just to make a buck. It is honestly a minor part, but this leads into the Mary Jane plot. You have Officer Goldman come by to the homes of the Parkers to tell Mary Jane that Jonathan Caesar, who was a guy who was crazy about Mary Jane, has broken out of jail. When you have the officer tell Mary Jane that with him broken out of jail, it seems that maybe he was the one who cut the wire that was holding up the light panel that fell on the director earlier. So it is him telling Mary Jane to be careful. And there's another page where we see that Nathan, the fiance of Aunt May, is dying soon. His death is going to be important for this story and later books as well, actually. Another page tells us about around this time in Spider-Man comics, Flash Thompson was dating Felicia Hardy. It wasn't like they really loved each other. It was more of Felicia Hardy trying to get back at Spider-Man for basically breaking up with her and getting married to Mary Jane. I'm just mentioning them because of how ridiculous their outfits look. Focusing on Peter Parker and Mary Jane, we see that the two of them are right now at some fundraiser, where Peter Parker was assigned to take some photos of the place. We even see that this fundraiser was able to get Captain America to show up. That gives Peter Parker the idea of trying to impress his wife by letting her meet Captain America. But when they go back to see him, well, he is already gone. Then we see the Shocker appear. You would think that maybe the Shocker is going to be the one who is going to join the Sinister Six, except of course he is not. He is just here for two reasons. The first being that to have some kind of fight scene in this chapter. Secondly, to make us think that Shocker is finally going to join the big leagues when it comes to villains. Except of course he is not, because you have Spider-Man actually beat the Shocker and web him up to make the scene go away. Speaking of the Sinister Six, we see Mysterio doing his usual thing on one of the bridges in New York, where again you have Doc Ock show up to recruit Mysterio to his cause. The way you have Mysterio join his team is stupid, because Doc Ock promised that if Mysterio joins in, well, he will be able to stop Mysterio from going to jail. That is all what Mysterio wants. Not to go to jail every time he gets beaten up by Spider-Man or other villains. The next page, we see Peter Parker finding out that Mysterio is back in the city. So now Peter Parker knows that he has to stop Doc Ock, Electro, and Mysterio. He has no idea about the Hobgoblin and Sandman yet, but he's starting to get concerned about what the villains are planning to do. Third chapter gives us the last member of the Sinister Six, which of course is Vulture, who is being watched by the Kingpin because the Kingpin wants to know if he should hire the Vulture to kill a guy named Raymond Trask. Raymond Trask didn't want to work with the Kingpin, so the Kingpin is planning on killing him by using the Vulture to go out there to kill him. This will tie into both the main Sinister Six storyline and also the Nathan Lubinsky storyline as well. So now Vulture is out there wreaking havoc. Getting deeper into the Nathan Lubinsky storyline, we actually pick up with Spider-Man swinging through the town to go check up on Aunt May. Also trying to figure out how Nathan was able to get all of that money from the bank. So he swings back to Aunt May's house where he pretends he is there to see her, but in reality, he's there to talk to Nathan. When Aunt May leaves, Peter talks to Nathan because Aunt May has no idea about the money. Nathan tells Peter that he cashed in his life insurance. We find out why here in a second. We then see that one of the guys, his name is Grouper, who was with the Kingpin earlier, has doubts that if the Vulture will be able to complete the assassination job that will end up killing Raymond Trask. So what he does is go behind the Kingpin's back and he hires another person to attempt to kill Raymond Trask. He hires a character named Chance, just a character that Marvel made who uses different equipment to make himself a villain. Nothing that big to worry about. There is a page where we finally learn about why Nathan Lubinsky took all of the money out of the bank. Why did he cash in on his life insurance? Well, he made a bet on Raymond Trask. We will learn why he did that down the road as we get deeper into this chapter. We skip over to Peter Parker going to some showcase where Raymond Trask is going to show off his new project. Aunt May and Nathan Lubinsky are also there too because Trask's life is on the line and Nathan made a bet on this man's life. We also see that Doctor Strange is there in his astral form, upset that there are people gathering here to see Trask's new item, which is random because he doesn't show up again in the rest of the book. Of course, that is when you have Vulture appear, who is of course there to kill off Trask. So you have Peter Parker switch into his Spider-Man outfit so he can go back out there and fight against the Vulture. This is a classic battle since these two have fought against each other so long throughout the times in Marvel Comics that with these two fighting again, it is bringing up a lot of old memories between the two of them. Spider-Man is really capable of taking down the Vulture since he's been fighting him for so long. Except, of course, there is always something that has to happen to make Spider-Man's life harder. Remember Chance, the guy who was hired to be a backup assassin to kill off Trask? Well, he shows up, which makes Spider-Man having to now deal with both Vulture and Chance. Really, I would say that it doesn't take him long to deal with Chance because he deals with him in literally about 3 pages. And you have Chance just fly away. He was one of those characters that had fans wondering, why is he here for? So now Spider-Man can now focus on Vulture, except since Aunt May and Nathan Lubinsky were there, well that leads into Vulture basically taking Aunt May as a hostage. So of course Spider-Man has to save her, but he has to be careful because Vulture could kill Aunt May. Except you have Nathan basically grab on the back of the Vulture to save his woman. That makes Vulture fly up in the air, but with Nathan riding on the back of Vulture, and then Nathan begins to fall out of the sky when he lets go of Vulture, since it was too much for his heart, by the time Spider-Man saves him from crashing on the ground, you have Vulture get away, who is saved by Doc Ock. So now the Sinister Six has formed and they can move forward with their big plan. While that is happening, Nathan dies in the arms of Aunt May, and we learn that he was planning to use the money that he has bet with to hopefully leave Aunt May with enough money so she can have a nicer time living and bills taken care of. So the opening pages of the 4th chapter we pick up with the funeral of Nathan Lubinsky, which sucks because this is now another man who Aunt May was dating that has now died. So it is Peter Parker and Mary Jane realizing that they need to be there for Aunt May more than ever now. This is a tragic moment, but that is the end of Nathan Lubinsky. Getting back to the Sinister Six, where we learned what Doc Ock is planning to do, which is to take over the same satellite that Empire State University is going to use for their ley lines project. Doc Ock explains that he wants to take control over the satellite and use the satellite to make a threat to the entire world. That if the world governments, don't give money to him and the rest of the Sinister Six, he is going to use the satellite to release a poison that will travel all over the world and kill everyone on Earth. So he sends out the Sinister Six to get parts they need to complete this plan. Also to get things they will need to make them immune to the poison. Focusing back on Mary Jane and Peter Parker, this next section feeds into both the Sinister Six plotline and Mary Jane plotline. Remember that Mary Jane's stalker, Jonathan Caesar, has broken out of prison. The reason why I say that is because while Peter Parker and Mary Jane get into an argument over dinner, they are both upset with what is going on in each of their lives. Jonathan Caesar is outside watching them and taking notes about them, letting us know that it's going to be resolved in this book as well. Now remember how Doc Ock has sent members of the Sinister Six to gather different things needed for their project. One of the things they needed is an item called the Bernadite, or the Bernadite. I cannot pronounce that word. Nothing special to go deep into to talk about, except with Hobgoblin and Mysterio trying to steal this item, well, Peter Parker was nearby and just changed into his Spider-Man outfit to fight against these guys. So with Spider-Man being here, it ends with Hobgoblin and Mysterio getting away with the item and Spider-Man being unable to follow them because thanks to Mysterio, he made the crowd of people who were nearby attack Spider-Man by making them think he was a bad guy or something. So, the Sinister Six continues to get what they want and need to complete their big goal. There is a part where you have the book focus on the relationship of Flash Thompson and Felicia Hardy. Remember, she's only dating him to get back at Spider-Man, so she doesn't really like him except when he does defend her against some thugs. She has a change of heart and actually begins to like Flash Thompson. Getting back to Spider-Man, well, we see him trying to stop Sandman and Vulture, who is right now trying to steal another piece of equipment for their project. Remember, Sandman is really not a bad guy. He is being forced to help Doc Ock. If he doesn't help Doc Ock out, Doc Ock will kill the family Sandman was living with. So even though you have Vulture and Sandman working together to get this equipment, Sandman is really thinking about how much he hates doing this. So instead of trying to kill Spider-Man, he just puts Spider-Man in a position where he is not able to follow them as they get away with the equipment they needed. There is also a page where you have Jonathan Caesar plotting his big scheme, where he is going to kidnap Mary Jane and take her to his private island. If she doesn't want to stay, the sharks out in the middle of the ocean will basically eat her. Getting back to Spider-Man, we see him dealing with Electro now, because every time he actually finishes fighting against someone or a couple of the members of the Sinister Six, he gets word about someone else from the Sinister Six doing something. So with him fighting against Electro, this fight doesn't last long because we have to move on to the 5th chapter. But when Electro leaves, Electro left a piece of paper that shows that Doc Ock is planning to attack the ley line satellite that Peter Parker is working on with some of the staff members from Empire State University. Also that Doc Ock is planning on betraying the rest of the Sinister Six. 5th chapter opens up with the Sinister Six using some underwater tech to let Doc Ock show the rest of the Sinister Six what they are going to steal, which is the ley line satellite. You have some of the members concerned that maybe Sandman may betray them since he was a good guy but being forced to help the Sinister Six. We also learned that while the Sinister Six was observing the satellite, Spider-Man was watching over it to see if the Sinister Six was going to attack. Except, of course, they don't. And you have him leaving to go check up on Aunt May since she just lost her husband. Sorry, fiance. where we see that she feels bad about wishing for Nathan to die. It wasn't like in a sick way, it was more of her wishing him to die to basically end his time being in pain with him having a bad heart. And you have Peter Parker cheer her up by stating that if he was in the same position she was in right now, like she is dying and he wants her to die to end her pain, she would not want Peter Parker to have a huge amount of guilt on his shoulders. After Peter Parker had dealt with that, on his way home from Aunt May's house, something almost falls on him, which could have killed him if he was just a regular person, but of course he is not. So thanks to his spider sense, he was able to dodge it. But when he went home to tell Mary Jane what had happened to him, she begins to think that it had to be Jonathan Caesar, the stalker, since we were told that he took out the director earlier. So it must have been him, since Peter Parker is married to Mary Jane. So Mary Jane decides that she is going to deal with Jonathan Caesar. There's a page where you have the Sinister Six putting everyone together for their project, except that is the moment you have Hobgoblin ask about the poison that they are supposed to use, where Doc Ock explains how dangerous the poison is and tells Hobgoblin to be careful with it. Then you have Hobgoblin take a sample to use for his own reasons. Getting back to Mary Jane, we get another page where we see her leaving Peter Parker to go to the gun store. She is going to get a gun to stop Jonathan Caesar. At the same time, Jonathan Caesar is actually at the hospital where the director from earlier is staying at. And you have Jonathan Caesar force him to write a note to trick Mary Jane to meet Jonathan Caesar at the set of their drama TV show. After he does that, you have Jonathan Caesar kill off the director and leave the hospital. Before we can finally get into that moment, you have Peter Parker hanging out around the launch of the satellite that he has been working on, thinking that the Sinister Six won't show up. Of course they do, which of course leads into a bunch of pages where Peter Parker has to change into his Spider-Man outfit and now has to deal with these villains. Since this is only part 5 of 6, you know that this is not the ending of the story. This leads into the moment where you have Sandman have a change of heart. Since Doc Ock was going to kill Spider-Man once and for all, Sandman couldn't stand at the thought of murder, so he decides to help Spider-Man, which is short-lived since Doc Ock was able to use some kind of device to make Sandman turn into glass. So where it seems that maybe Sandman and Spider-Man were going to team up, we don't get that at all. You have Doc Ock go inside the lab to launch the satellite while letting the rest of the Sinister Six deal with Spider-Man. Now, once Doc Ock is able to launch the satellite up into space, you have Hobgoblin thinking that this will be a good time to try to kill Spider-Man. So he uses that poison sample that he stole earlier on Spider-Man that is supposed to kill someone in 15 seconds. Except in the final chapter, we come to find out that Spider-Man is not dead, that the poison Hobgoblin used on Spider-Man actually didn't work. This is where we find out the real plan of Doc Ock. And let me say how crazy this book gets. So you have Doc Ock mention that he never intended to poison the whole world. He wanted to fix cocaine addiction. So after all of the work he did recruiting the new Sinister Six, getting all of the parts he needed for this project, and going out of their way to actually complete their goal, this man never wanted to take over the world. He wanted to fix cocaine addiction. So honestly, not really a bad thing, but how he went for this goal is bad, to be honest. You have Doc Ock able to get away, but he leaves without the rest of the Sinister Six. Really, they all leave and go their own way. So you have Spider-Man go home thinking that he's going to have a normal day. But you have Mary Jane say she is going to leave because she got a note from her director that he wants to meet up, which we know is not true. But also at the same time, Peter Parker gets a call where he is told that even though Doc Ock is trying to fix the cocaine addiction issue, well, thanks to Doc Ock, he actually may have led to poisoning the whole world. So basically, Doc Ock ended up doing what he was lying about doing. Now, I'm going to wrap up this video by getting to the endpoints for all of the different plots that were going on in this book. Starting with Mary Jane, who goes to the set of her show thinking that she is meeting up with the director, only to find out that it is Jonathan Caesar who is trying to kidnap her. Of course, she hates that idea. Before he is able to do anything to Mary Jane, Officer Goldman, the guy who warned her about Jonathan Caesar being out of prison, he comes in and actually shoots and kills off Jonathan Caesar. This is where the plotline gets even crazier. Goldman is not even an officer. He is just some file clerk who also wants to kidnap Mary Jane. The only difference is that he really likes Mary Jane more for her character in the show she plays in. Either way, she is able to knock him out very easily. Getting back to Spider-Man, you have him find the base of Doc Ock because he was able to place a spider tracer on the back of Doc Ock earlier. Either way, he came here to the base of Doc Ock to look for the Burnite, the same item Doc Ock mentioned he needed for his fake plan to poison the world. Well, this same item can be used to actually end the poison that Doc Ock had accidentally released into the world. So they fight for a couple pages. In the middle of those pages, the Mary Jane plotline is going on as well. Either way, Spider-Man doesn't capture Doc Ock, but he is able to get the Burnite and leaves to get back to the scientists to save the world. The story ends with Spider-Man calling up Thor, and Thor being able to throw the Burnite into the Earth atmosphere to be able to let the Burnite spread all over the world to stop the poison. And that is really the end of the book. So the cocaine addiction problem did not get fixed, and Peter Parker and Mary Jane go home to each other to tell each other they had a stressful day. But this is where we are going to end today's video. So please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoyed today's video.